Hello and welcome to Nithrania YouTube channel. You're watching another episode of the Game in a Nutshell series designed for explaining the board game rules. My name is Branislav Berec, and in this video we're going to learn how to play Woodcraft from Ross Arnold and Vladimir Suchy, published by Delicious Games. And before we start, let me say that what you're going to see in this video is a pre-production prototype version of the game, so the components are not final. So without any further ado, let's get started. To set the game up, place this action wheel board in the center of the table. Place these 7 action tiles in one quadrant of the action wheel board, and for the first game it's recommended to use this particular quadrant. However, you can use any one quadrant of your choice. The order of those 7 action tiles in the quadrant is not relevant, as I will explain later in the gameplay section of the video. Then lay this arc tile over these bonus icons in the starting quadrant. So if you would place these action tiles in a different quadrant as the starting quadrant, you would place that arc tile on the corresponding section. Then set this circular saw so that this black arrow is pointing at the far end of the following quadrant. As indicated by these squares, take 2 dice of each color, roll them and place them on the designated spaces. Place this income board nearby and use this side for solo game and 2 and 3 player game. The reverse side is used in a 4 player game. I'm going to demonstrate a 3 player game. So each player takes one of their counters and places it in the starting position of each of these tracks. This is the hazelnut track, which represents victory points in the game. This is the blueberry track representing currency in the game, and this is the reputation track. Then place the round marker on the first space of the round track. Finally, there are 3 reputation track tiles. One side of the tile is used in a 3 player game, the other side is used in a 4 and a 2 player game. Randomly choose 2 of these tiles and place them on these pale spaces, again with the corresponding side up. Then place the scoring board next to the action wheel board, and each player places their scoring marker on the 0 space of the scoring track. And shuffle the deck of early order cards and draw 4 of them face up in these spaces. Similarly, shuffle the deck of early helper cards and draw 4 of them face up in this area. And finally, take these public contracts and deal 1 more contract than the number of players in the game. So in a 3 player game, there are 4 public contracts in the game. Return the unused public contracts back to the game box. You can also shuffle the deck of late game order cards and late game helper cards. These will be used later in the game. Then, based on the chosen color, give each player the corresponding player board, 1 sewing tile, which is placed over here, 1 splicing tile placed over here, and 2 more sewing tiles, 2 more specific splicing tiles, and 1 gluing tile, together with 2 pots, yellow and brown pot. These tiles are in the player's reserve and players will be able to acquire them over the course of the game. But for now, let me set these tiles aside. Then each player takes 1 brown, yellow and green die. Brown die set to value 1, yellow to 2 and green to 3. One of the player counters is set in this first space of this marketing track, and you should have 4 counters remaining. And finally, each player takes 1 lantern token and 12 blueberries. Only in a 4 player game, players would start with 2 lanterns. Then each player takes 3 early helper cards, 5 early order cards, and 2 random hazelnut order cards. Always keep your cards hidden from other players. Now look at those helpers, choose 1 of them and place the card in this space on your player board. Pay the cost indicated in the top left corner, and if the card has any immediate effect marked with this flash symbol, apply that effect immediately. The other 2 helpers are discarded. Then look at those 5 early order cards and choose 2 of them to keep in your hand and discard the remaining 3. And those 2 chosen cards together with those 2 hazelnut order cards are your starting order cards. Now choose 1 of these 4 cards and place it to the side of your player board in the row with the matching icon. So if you would keep this order, it would be placed in this row over here with the matching icon. And take the remaining 3 cards back into your hand. Randomly choose the starting player who will get this first player card, and we're ready to go. By the way, the first player in the game never changes. In Woodcraft, players represent, well, woodcrafters who produce these beautiful products, wooden products from various types of wood represented by these dice, using their tools like circular saw, glues and other tools in their workshop. The game is played over a set number of rounds, and each round each player takes 1 turn. Players take these turns starting with the first player and then going in a clockwise direction. The phases of a turn are displayed on your player board. In the first phase these trees grow, so if you would have a die in the pot, it would increase its value by the given number. Then in a second phase you choose 1 action tile from the action wheel board and perform the action from that tile plus any number of free actions and some bonus actions. So you choose any of the action tiles, and later in the game you may get some bonuses from this circular saw or from the outer ring. Then you move the tile to the next quadrant and take the action from the tile. The main action and all the additional actions or bonus actions can be taken in any order. Finally, at the end of your turn, you may spend blueberries to buy victory points or hazelnuts using this marketing chart, and then it's the next player's turn. Once all players have taken 1 turn, move the round marker 1 space forward and begin the next round. I will cover all these action tiles and the corresponding actions in more detail in the next chapter of the video. But in a nutshell, with this one you can buy lumber, with this one you can sell and buy the lumber with value 6. With this action tile you can buy these tokens. This is a saw token, glue and scrapwood tokens. These are used to either split the value of a die or combine the values of 2 different dice or increase the value of 1 die. All of those are so-called free actions in your turn. With this action tile, you may choose new orders from the display. With this one, you may choose new helper from the display. Then, with the next action tile, you may have your helpers produce the items in their top right-hand corner, and you can plant the trees if you have any pot available. And by the way, at any time on your turn, you can take a die or dice from these pots and add them to your reserve as lumber. And finally, with this last action, you can improve your workshop, which means you can buy additional saw tokens or splicing tokens or this blue token or additional pots. When the round marker reaches the space with this icon, the income phase is triggered. There are 4 income phases in the game. You will gain income based on the position of your markers on these income tracks. You will gain hazelnuts, so victory points, and blueberries, which is again a currency in the game. As indicated by these icons, there is some additional administration. Some of the orders will be refreshed, and if you have activated any of your tokens, they will be reactivated now. When you finish the last round of the game, then the final income phase is triggered, and then the game ends. During the final scoring, in addition to the victory points you gain over the course of the game, usually from this marketing chart at the end of your turn when you can buy these points or by completing these orders, you will score additional victory points from these public contracts if you manage to acquire some of them during the game. Then for any order you have not completed until the end of the game, you will lose some reputation on this reputation track, and then, based on the position of your marker on this reputation track, you will score victory points for each order you have completed during the game. Then you can gain some small victory points from your leftovers, and then the player with the most victory points is the winner. So, at the start of your turn, first you grow your trees. All dice in your pots increase the value by 2, as indicated by these icons here. And that applies to all dice that have been planted in your pots. So each of them grows by 2, and At any time, if any of these dice reaches the value 6, you have to move it immediately to your supply. Then, in the second phase of your turn, you will take actions. To take an action, you have to choose one of the 7 action tiles on this action wheel board, and to demonstrate how it works, I have advanced the game a little further. So, to take an action, you choose one tile, let's say it's going to be this one. Then, you take the bonus from the outer ring corresponding to the position of the tile, if there is any. You will also take the bonus from this circular saw, if there is any, for example like here or here. For this one there is no bonus. And then you can take the action and advance the action tile to the next quadrant clockwise until it hits another action tile in that quadrant. So if any player would choose this tile, for example, they would gain this bonus, 2 victory points, advance the tile to the next quadrant clockwise until it hits the first action tile. Note, then you stop when you hit the first action tile. Don't fill in these gaps. If you choose an action tile and when moving the tile you move across this black arrow, move that arrow as well, which changes the available bonuses here. And if you would like to choose the action tile which would cross this black arrow, however, the black arrow would also cross any tiles in the next quadrant, the circular saw gets blocked and you may not perform that action. So in other words, you may not move this black arrow through the quadrant where there are still some action tiles available. Now, this arc tile which covers the bonuses in the starting quadrant is removed once all action tiles are moved away from that first quadrant. And as these icons indicate, if you spend a lantern after you choose any of the action tiles, let's say this one, and you take the corresponding bonuses and move the action tile to the next quadrant, instead of taking action from that action tile, you can choose an action from any of the action tiles. However, you have to have that lantern token available before you choose an action. It may not be the lantern which you gain as a bonus from choosing the action tile. Then this second set of icon indicates that if you spend 3 lantern tokens, you may perform 1 additional bonus action from any of the action tiles. However, this time you don't move that action token and you don't even get any bonuses from that action token. So this bonus action is only limited to an action on the action tile without even moving it. Finally, if you are in some sort of an emergency state, after you choose the action tile and take the bonuses from that tile, and after you move the action tile to the next quadrant, instead of performing the action, you can simply take 3 blueberries. In this section of the video, I'm going to explain all the actions in the game, and we will start with this first one, buying a lumber. As the action tile indicates, you can buy up to 2 dice from the display. The price for each die is equal to the number of pips on the die plus the premium based on this table. There is no premium for green dice, 1 blueberry, additional blueberry for yellow dice, and 2 blueberries for brown dice. So for the yellow 4, you would have to pay 4 plus 1, 5 blueberries. So place the die in your supply and pay the cost. After you buy a die or dice, roll new ones to replace those you have just bought. Then, with the next action, you may sell one of your dice and then buy a die of any color with value 6. When you sell your die, you gain twice the number of pips on that die plus any premium. So, for example, for selling this 3, you would gain 6 blueberries. The die is returned to the general supply, and then you may buy a die with value 6, again from the general supply, so not from this area. And if you sold a die in the first step, you may only buy a die with value 6 of a different color. That's what this icon indicates. So, for example, it could be yellow 6. Again, you have to pay the full price, which means in this case 6 blueberries and since it's a yellow die, you would have to pay 1 additional blueberry, so 7 in total. It is again placed in your supply and you have to pay the cost. With the next action tile, you may buy these materials. You may buy up to 2 types, and if you buy 2, they must be different. You may buy these saw blade tokens, gluing tokens and scrapwood tokens, and if you buy 2 different types, it means they have to be 2 different types. You may not buy, for example, 2 and 3 gluing tokens, because that's just one type. It has to be 2 different types. It doesn't matter which option you choose. So let's say we want to buy 2 saw blade tokens and 2 gluing tokens, both for 3 blueberries. Place those tokens in your supply and again pay the cost. With this action tile, you may either choose 1 new order, or if you pay 3 blueberries, you may choose 2 new orders. When you choose a new order, you can choose any of those 4 face-up orders, and you have to place that order immediately beside your player board, again to the row with the matching icon. You can have unlimited number of orders in the same row. Then select the remaining orders and refill the display with a new card. If you pay 3 blueberries, you may immediately choose another order and again place it in the corresponding row next to your player board. Obviously, refill the display in the same way. The next action tile works in a very similar way as the previous one, choosing the orders. However, this time you can only choose 1 helper, and unlike the order cards, when you choose a helper, you have to pay the cost in the top left-hand corner. Most helpers have abilities which are indicated here, although not all of them have abilities. The abilities with this flash icon are immediate effects, so you immediately take what's printed there. These abilities are permanent abilities, and these ones can be used once per turn. In addition, each helper has this production ability, so it's this icon indicating what you gain when you activate that production. I'll talk about that in just a minute. So, after you pay the cost, take the helper and place it on your player board orthogonally adjacent to any of your previously placed helpers. After you do that, look at the top right corner of that space and advance on the corresponding income track indicated number of spaces. So here it's 1 space on the hazelnut income track, and if later in the game you place a helper in this space, you may immediately activate the production effects on 4 of your helpers, and if you place it here, on 6 of your helpers. So those are these effects. Then again, slide the helpers and draw the new one face up. I'm not going to explain all those effects on the helper cards. You can find them in the help sheet. Then with the next action tile, you have 2 options. You may either gain production from 2 helpers or gain production from 1 helper and plant a tree. As I have already outlined, when you gain a production from the helper, you gain the items from the top right hand corner of the card. So for example, if we would choose this effect, we would gain this tile reuse token. And in order to plant a tree, you must have a pot available, an empty pot. If you don't, remember, you can always harvest a tree in your pot at any time on your turn, so you simply take it and add it to your supply, and then you may only plant a die of the same color and only with a value 1 or 2. If you have a die with a higher value, you may cut the die for free. For free meaning you don't have to spend your sewing token, as we will see in just a minute. And when you cut the die, you will split the value of the die into 2 different dice. The sum of those 2 numbers have to match the number of the original die. And then you keep one of those dice in your supply and plant the other to the pot. When you only have the green pot or green and yellow pot, you may still only plant 1 die per action. Once you gain this brown pot, you will be able to plant 2 dice with 1 action. And finally, with this last action tile, you may improve your workshop. With this action, you may do one of the following. You may either buy a new pot or new sewing token, new splicing token, or the gluing token. In each case, you have to pay the price indicated on those spots. When you buy pots, first you have to buy this yellow pot. When you do, you have to pay 4 blueberries, increase your income on the hazelnut track by 1, and this yellow pot comes with the yellow die of value 1. Later in the game, when you buy the brown pot, pay the price, increase your income, and again, it comes with the brown die of value 1. However, with this brown pot, you gain the ability of planting 2 trees with 1 action. Sowing tokens are used to cut dice. When you upgrade the workshop, first you have to buy this sowing token. You immediately gain this benefit, which means anytime you buy a die with value 6, you have to pay 2 blueberries less. And don't forget to increase your income. When you manage to buy this upgrade, again, you have to pay the cost, but you also increase your reputation. When you improve these splicing tokens, again, pay the price, increase your income, and you have to improve this tile first before later in the game you improve the workshop with this token. And finally, in order to glue dice together, you have to have this gluing token. Pay the price, increase your income, and place the token on your player board. In addition to your main action, you can perform any number of these free actions in any order you want. First, you can use these once per turn abilities of your helpers. When you do, find some suitable method to indicate that you have done so. Second, you can saw lumber, which means you can take a die from your supply and split it into smaller values. To do that, you have to have at least one of these sewing tokens available. So to cut the die, take the die, obviously use the sewing token, take another die from the general supply and split the 6 into any 2 values you find suitable. So let's say, for example, 4 and 2. If you want, and if you have these saw blade tokens available, you can continue sawing that lumber. Use the same method, so for example, we'll take this 4, split it into 3 and 1, taking the 1 from the general supply, and for that we have to spend the saw blade token. You can continue like this as long as you have the saw blade tokens available. If you need to cut another die, you would have to use another sewing token. Another free action is splicing. If you have these splicing tokens available, at least one of them, you can increase the value of 1 die. With this first one, after you use the Scrapwood token, after you spend it, you may increase the value of any 1 die by 1 pip. So let's say we'll take this yellow 2 and make it yellow 3. Again, flip the token to indicate that it has been used. With this token, you can increase the value of 1 die by 1 or 2 pips. And if you would have this one, you can increase the value from 1 up to 4 pips. You may never increase the value of a die to more than 6. If you have this gluing tile available, you can glue or combine 2 dice that have the total value of 6 or less. To do that, you will need this gluing token, you need to spend it. And then, when you combine dice of the same color, you simply return one of those dice back to the general supply and set the value of the second die to the total value. But you can also glue dice of different colors, and remember, you can always harvest a die from your pots. In this case, when you combine dice of different color, you immediately score 4 victory points. You don't increase your income, you simply score those 4 victory points. You choose which of those colors to keep and set the value of the die to the total value and return the other die back to the general supply. In either case, flip the glowing token, it cannot be used until another income phase. However, if you have this reuse token, you can always spend that token and flip one of your used tokens back to the unused side. Then, as I already said, another free action is harvesting the tree, which means you can take any die from these spots and add it to your supply, and at any time, if any of these dice reaches the value 6, you have to move it immediately to your supply. Then, as one of the free actions, you can complete the order if you meet the requirements on the order card. You can complete more than one order during the same turn. The requirements are shown at the bottom of the card. Usually it's dice of certain colors and values. Sometimes you also have to spend scrapwood tokens, gluing tokens and other items. And when you have to spend dice of certain colors and numbers, the colors and numbers have to match exactly. So to complete this order, for example, we can take this green 1, brown 2 and brown 3. These dice are spent, which means they are returned back to the general supply. And after completing the order, take the reward from the row where that order is located. In this case, it would be 2 points on the reputation track, which is this bottom track on the income board. And you also gain rewards shown on the left side of the card. In this case, it will be 1 victory point and the yellow die with value 6. Mark the victory point on the victory point track. Once the order is completed, keep it somewhere next to your player board. You will score these orders at the end of the game. Note that if you complete an order which is located in this row, you don't get any reward from the player board, and if it's located in the last row, after you complete it, you actually lose 1 victory point. So the sooner you complete the order, the higher the benefit. When you complete this hazelnut order, that's the order with this bag. As a reward from the card, you can either choose 5 hazelnuts and 5 blueberries, or you can claim a public contract, which is this icon. Choose one of the public contracts still available in the display. Take one of your remaining markers and place it on the chosen public contract. Other players may claim the same contract in the same round. However, if they don't, at the end of the round, remove such public contract from the display and place it somewhere next to your player board. You will score that contract at the end of the game. If any other player would manage to claim the contract in the same round, you still remove that public contract from the display and place it somewhere next to your player board, but keep the tokens of other players on it as well. Those players will also score that contract at the end of the game. And finally, these ethic bonuses. Anytime you gain a tool token, for example from completing order like this with this icon, place that token in your ethic and you have to start with the bottom row first. And when you place another token in the space which is adjacent to another tool token and these two tokens have different types, you gain the bonus shown between those spaces. Once you have the tokens in 2 adjacent spaces, the next one can be placed on top of them. And again, if it's a different type, you gain the bonus between those spaces. In this case, you would also gain this bonus. The only exceptions are these top spaces. When you manage to get a tool token here, you can place another token in this space, and again, if they're different type, you get the bonus shown between those spaces. At the end of your turn, after you complete all your actions, you can buy victory points by spending blueberries. Based on the position of your marker, you have to spend the blueberries indicated in the next space and gain the victory points. If you do, move your marker to the next space. At the end of your next turn, in this example, you would have to spend 2 blueberries and gain 2 victory points. Again, you would move the marker to the next space. So you may never choose any of the previous spaces, and you may never choose spaces which are further ahead. Furthermore, you may only do 1 purchase at the end of the turn, so you may only move maximum 1 space. And once you reach the last space, after you spend 12 blueberries and gain 11 victory points, you don't move to the next space, you remain in the same one, and at the end of the next turn you can again spend 12 blueberries to score 11 victory points until the end of the game. Then in the second step, at the end of your turn, if you have more than 6 dice in your supply, you have to discard down to 6 and you choose which dice you would discard. Only consider the dice in your supply, not the dice in your pots. At the end of the round, when all players perform their turns, move the round marker to the next space and you can begin the next round. However, if the marker is moved to the space with this icon, perform the income phase. The income phase procedure is shown here on the action wheel board. First, slide all of your incomplete orders down one row, and in case you have to slide the order below this last space, as indicated here, you lose 2 reputation and the order is discarded. Then look at the orders you still have in your hand, choose one of those orders and place it beside your player board to the row with the matching icon. Then gain income based on the position of your markers on these income tracks, so you gain victory points and you gain blueberries. Then reset all your used splicing tiles, gluing tiles and the sewing tiles on your player board. And in this first and third income phase, take 2 orders from the spaces with this X and 2 helpers with the spaces with the X. Discard them, slide the remaining orders and helpers to the right, and draw new cards face up. During the second income phase, as indicated by this icon, discard all early orders and all early helpers. Take the decks of late game order cards and late game helper cards and draw 4 cards from both decks. When moving on these income tracks, when you cross this line with the tool token icon with any of your income markers, take a random tool token from the general supply, and when you cross it with a second marker, take the tool token again. When you cross the line with this icon, take 3 victory points immediately. Again, when you cross it with a second marker, do it again. And in case you would increase your position further than 10, take another of your markers and start counting from 1. However, this time, when you cross the line, you don't get these bonuses for the second time. And finally, these reputation track tiles, the first player in a 3-player game to reach the tile gains the benefit from the top space. The player who reaches the tile as the second player gains the second benefit. The third player would gain nothing. In case both players reach it in the same round, they gain the same benefit. So for example, if both of these players would be the first to reach it during the same round, they would both get 1 production and 2 victory points. Then the third player later in the game would gain nothing. In a 4-player game, first player would gain the first benefit, second player the second, third player third, fourth player would gain nothing, and in a 2-player game, the first player only gains the benefit in the middle, the second player gains nothing. When you manage to reach the last space on the reputation track and you would gain another reputation, simply score 2 victory points immediately. After the end of the last round in the game, perform the last income phase, and after that the game will be over. In addition to the victory points you scored over the course of the game, add the victory points from the public contracts you have claimed, and in case the same contract is claimed by more than 1 player, both players or all players would score that contract. Then score the leftovers, count up all the pips on your dice remaining in your supply, plus all the remaining blueberries and all the remaining material tokens. So here we have 22 pips plus 3 plus 2, that's 27, and score 1 victory point for each 10 rounded down. So in this case it would be 2 victory points. Then for each of your incomplete orders you would lose 2 reputation, and only after losing the reputation, count the number of your completed orders. So let's say it would be 6 orders, and multiply that number by the victory points you have achieved with your marker on the reputation track. So in this case, for orange player, it would be 3 victory points for each of those orders. So that's 18 victory points. Sum up the victory points for all players in the game, and then the player with the most points is the winner. So that's how you play Woodcraft. If you would have any questions or comments, please put them into the comment sections below. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. If you like the series, please subscribe. You can even support the channel on the Patreon page, or you can click the button thank you under the video and support the channel with some symbolic amount. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell. My name is Branislav Berec and hope to see you next time. I would like to thank everyone who has ever supported the channel, and especially the current supporters listed on this page. If you too would like to support the channel in creation of videos like this and other video tutorials and other content on this channel, please visit the patreon.com/Nithrania.